friends. I am so glad you are here today. Take a slow breath, relax your shoulders, make yourself comfortable, and let the story begin. Now, imagine for a moment that you are standing on a rocky shore. The wind is cold, the sea is wide and gray, the horizon is very far away. Beside you, a small boy looks out at the water. He is quiet, he is serious, and in his eyes there is something hard to name. Not fear, not sadness, something more like hunger. A deep, quiet hunger for something far beyond this small island. His name is Napoleon. He is 9 years old. He lives on a small island, and he does not know it yet. But one day, this island will feel too small for him. One day, even all of Europe will feel too small. Stay with me, my friend. Today we travel back in time together. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, the boy from a small island who became the most powerful man in the world. And it begins exactly here, on this rocky shore, looking out at the sea. The year was 1769. On a small island called Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea, a baby boy was born. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. Corsica is a green, rocky island with tall mountains and a wild, beautiful coastline. The people of Corsica were proud, but they were not rich, and they were not powerful. Napoleon's father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a lawyer. His mother, Laetitia, was a strong and serious woman. She raised her 8 children with discipline and with love. She told them that life is not always kind, and she told them that you must work hard for everything you want. Napoleon was the second of these 8 children. Life in the family home was busy and sometimes difficult. But young Napoleon was different from the other children. He was quiet. He was serious. He was always thinking. He loved to read. At night, when the house was quiet and the family was asleep, Napoleon would stay awake with a candle and a book. He read about Julius Caesar, the Roman general who changed the ancient world. He read about Alexander the Great, the young king who built an enormous empire. He read about great battles and great leaders and great ideas. The world outside his window was small, but inside his books, it was endless. He was not the loudest child in the room. He was not the strongest. But his mind was always moving, always asking, always dreaming of something beyond that rocky shore. And then, when Napoleon was just 9 years old, his father made a decision that would send young Napoleon far, far away from everything he knew. He was going to send him to France. When Napoleon was 9 years old, he left Corsica for the first time. His father sent him to a school for soldiers in France, a military school. For a boy from a small island, France was a very different world. It was large and loud and full of history. Paris felt nothing like Corsica. And Napoleon, standing in the school courtyard for the first time, felt very alone. He was different from the other boys. He spoke French with a strong Corsican accent. The other students laughed at him. They called him names. They said he was not really French. He was an outsider. And Napoleon felt this very deeply. One teacher said to him, "Young man, you do not belong here." Napoleon heard those words, and he chose to prove them wrong. He did not cry. He did not go home. Instead, he studied harder than anyone else. He became very skilled at mathematics. He loved history and geography. He read everything he could find. He became very close to one thing above all else: books. Books did not laugh at his accent. Books did not care where he came from. In books, he found the great men of history: Caesar, Alexander, Hannibal. He studied how they thought, how they moved, how they won, and And slowly he began to understand something very important. Greatness did not come from a name or a family or a place. It came from inside. Something grew inside him. Not just knowledge, something stronger than knowledge. A quiet, burning confidence. He began to see that being an outsider was not a weakness. The outsider sees what the insider cannot. The outsider hungers for what the insider already has. He was 16 years old when he graduated from the military school in Paris. He was ready. He was focused. He was hungry. And the world he was about to step into was changing fast. The change was coming, and it was dangerous. It was the late 1780s. France was in trouble. Deep trouble. The poor people of France had almost nothing. No food, no money, no hope. Bread, the most basic food, cost more than a worker could earn in a day. Children were hungry. Old people were cold. The anger had been growing for years, quietly, building beneath the surface. And in 1789, it exploded. The French Revolution began. A revolution means a complete and dramatic change. The old world of kings and queens began to fall apart. Cities were loud with noise and fear. Streets filled with angry, desperate people. It was a time of great change and great danger. And in this chaos, a young soldier named Napoleon began to rise. He was brave, he was smart, and he understood something very important. In times of great change, the people who think clearly and act quickly are the ones who move forward. Napoleon was exactly that kind of person. He fought in several battles and showed great skill. He was not afraid of danger. He made fast, clear decisions. He inspired the soldiers around him. People began to notice him. People began to follow him. And at the age of 24, Napoleon became a general. The person who commands an entire army at 24 years old. Can you imagine that? The quiet boy from Corsica. The outsider who was laughed at. He was now one of the most important military leaders in France. He once said, simply, "Impossible." That is not a French word. For Napoleon, nothing was impossible. He believed this completely, but Napoleon was not finished. No, for Napoleon, becoming a general was only the beginning. The years that followed were years of triumph. Napoleon won battle after battle. In Italy, he won victories that surprised even the most experienced generals in Europe. He moved his armies faster than anyone had seen before. He was always one step ahead, always thinking further than his enemies. The generals who fought against him could not understand how a young man from a small island could be so consistently brilliant. He was not the tallest commander. He was not the oldest. But he was the most intelligent. And intelligence, Napoleon believed, was the most powerful weapon of all. He fought in Egypt. He became a hero to the French people. They loved him. They trusted him. They believed in him. In 1799, Napoleon made a bold and dangerous move. He took control of the French government. It was fast, it was calculated, and it worked. Napoleon became the leader of France. And then, on a cold December day in 1804, in the great cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, something happened that the world had not seen for a very long time. Napoleon stood before thousands of people, generals, politicians, leaders from across Europe. Even the Pope himself was there, ready to place the crown on Napoleon's head. The whole world was watching. Every eye in that great cathedral was fixed on this one moment. The candles burned, the music was silent, and everyone waited. But Napoleon did not wait. He took the golden crown himself. He looked forward, and he placed it on his own head. He was now Emperor of France. word emperor comes from an old Latin word, imperator, which means the one who commands. And Napoleon, who had once been an outsider, the boy who was told he did not belong, was now the one who commanded everything. He changed the laws of France. He built roads, schools, and hospitals. He created a system of rules called the Napoleonic Code. In this case, the word code means a set of clear rules and laws. These rules were so well organized and so clear that France still uses them today, more than 200 years later. His name, written into the laws of a nation, forever. He had crossed every border. He had broken every limit. He had gone from a small island to the top of the world. But power, as many people in history have learned, is a very difficult thing to hold. And the higher you rise, the harder the fall can be. In 1812, Napoleon made the greatest mistake of his life. He decided to invade Russia. Russia was a massive country, cold, vast, and very difficult to fight in. Napoleon gathered an army of more than 600,000 soldiers. It was the largest army in European history at that time. An ocean of soldiers stretching across the land. At first, the plan seemed to work. The Russian army moved back. They did not fight directly. They pulled deep into their country. And as they moved, they burned their own villages. They burned the crops and the food. They left nothing behind for Napoleon's army. Napoleon marched forward. He reached Moscow, the great Russian city. But when he arrived, Moscow was empty, cold, and silent. There was nothing to eat, nothing to take, nothing to win. And then winter came. The Russian winter is unlike anything in Western Europe. It is deep and dark and brutal. Snow fell for weeks without stopping. The temperature dropped so low that metal became too cold to touch. Soldiers, many of them from warm countries in southern Europe, had never experienced anything like this. They had no warm clothing. They had little food. Soldiers began to die, not from battles. Cold killed them. Hunger killed them. The long, frozen road home killed them. Napoleon had to retreat. He had to go back. And that retreat became one of the most terrible events in military history. More than half of his great army did not return. Napoleon had crossed so many borders in his life. He had crossed mountains and seas and centuries of history. But Russia was a border he could not cross. His enemies were watching, and they began to see something they had never seen before. Napoleon could lose. After Russia, things moved quickly. The great countries of Europe, England, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, joined together against Napoleon. They had one goal. They wanted him gone. Napoleon fought back. He was still brilliant. He was still brave. But he was tired. His army was smaller now. His empire was beginning to crack. In 1814, the armies of Europe entered Paris. Napoleon, for the first time in his life, had no choice. He gave up power. He was sent away to an island, a small island called Elba in the Mediterranean Sea. A small island, not so very different, perhaps, from the island where he was born. But Napoleon was not a man who accepted defeat quietly. 10 months later, he escaped from Elba. He returned to France, and the French people welcomed him back. Soldiers who were sent to stop him joined him instead. For one short and hopeful moment, it seemed the story might continue, but it did not. In June 1815, at a place called Waterloo in Belgium, Napoleon fought his final battle. The Allied armies were too strong. He lost. This time, there was no escape. He was sent to a tiny, remote island called St. Helena, far out in the South Atlantic Ocean. It was one of the most isolated places on Earth, thousands of miles from France, thousands of miles from everything he had built. Napoleon never left that island. He lived there for 6 years, quiet and alone. And in 1821, he died. He was 51 years old. The boy from Corsica, the outsider, the general, the emperor, gone. And so, my friends, the story of Napoleon Bonaparte comes quietly to its end. He was born on an island. He spent his entire life crossing borders. He crossed the limits of what people thought was possible. He crossed oceans and mountains and centuries of history. And at the very end, the world sent him back to an island. Quiet, alone, far from everything he had built. What does this story leave us with? Napoleon was not a perfect man. He made terrible mistakes. He caused great suffering. Wars always do. But there is something in his journey that speaks to all of us. He was an outsider. He came from a small place with a strange accent and an unfamiliar name. The world told him, quietly but clearly, that he did not belong, and he refused to believe it. He studied. He worked. He believed that knowledge and effort could change a life, and they did. Not perfectly, not without pain, but powerfully. Think about that for a moment. A boy laughed at for his accent. A boy told he did not belong. A boy from a small island that most of Europe had never even thought about. He became the person who shaped the history of an entire continent. Now, I want to say something to you, my friend. You are crossing a border too. Every time you listen to a story in English, you are stepping across a line. Every time you hear a new word and your mind quietly understands it, you are crossing a border. A line between who you were yesterday and who you are becoming today. Maybe it is not always easy. Maybe some days the words feel far away, like a horizon you cannot quite reach. But you are here. You are listening. You are moving forward. Napoleon was told he did not belong, but he crossed every border anyway. And so are you. Every story you listen to, every word you understand, every sentence that becomes a little clearer, that is a step, that is a crossing, and that is something to be very proud of. Keep listening, keep learning, keep going. This is Storytime English. If Napoleon's story moved you today, please leave a comment below. Tell me, what part of his journey surprised you the most? I would love to hear from you. There are many more stories waiting for you right here. Come back soon, my friend. Until next time, take care of yourself and never stop learning.